Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Superboy Beyond. What you doing? Go on, just sit still. Good girl. And wrecking my t-shirt now, trying to fight my headphones. We are returning to the Fleischer cartoons today for another commentary. We are watching the second episode, which is a lot of people's favourite episode, The Mechanical Monsters. And yeah, Little Salem is going to be joining us, so that'll be fun. So get your DVDs ready. If this is your first time watching alongside us, this is not like a typical YouTube reaction video. There will be no clips or audio from the episode. What are you doing? But there will be a heavily filtered version up there in the middle, so you can at least keep in time with us if you need to pause for whatever reason. Yeah, probably the least professional intro we've ever done, but there we go. Let's move straight into the episode. The Mechanical Monsters in 3, 2, 1, play.
Okay, got our typical Paramount picture opening.
I never get used to seeing the Paramount logo at the start. But then I should be used to it because Superboy always ended with the Viacom logo, so it's not unusual. I just always expect it to be Warner Brothers, you know.
Well, remember, this was back before Warner Brothers had the rights to the DC catalog. And you know what you were saying before about this being most people's favorite? This is probably one of my 3 favorites, this one.
It's definitely the most iconic, certainly from a visual standpoint, but also it's a pretty good story. It's been a while since I've seen it, but this is one of those episodes that is, you know, it's a lot of people's favorites for a very good reason.
And I mean, just the animation that the Fleischer house did on this is just so amazing. I mean,
yeah, it's amazing, really. It's a shame that the whole rotoscoping process is so incredibly expensive because it really does just look beautiful at times.
Yep.
Let's face it, Disney used to do it an awful lot as well. You see all those famously, you can see clips of the young actress that was playing Alice in Wonderland, and they literally filmed her practically the entire thing, it seems, in live action, and then just animated over her performance. It's brilliant. Oh, and there is the mechanical monster, very cleverly first revealed in shadow, which I think is a very cool sort of filming technique. What are you doing biting my headphones? Get off. Get off. It's not for biting. No, it's not for biting. It's not for biting.
The interesting thing about the mechanical monsters is that technically, this is the first of 2 appearances that they make in any version of the DC universe.
What was the other time that they appear?
There was a story in the 1970s in Action Comics called Superman Takes a Wife. It was the marriage of the Earth 2 Superman and Lois Lane. And at the beginning of the story, he battles a character called Colonel Future, who's a criminal on Earth 2. And he's using these mechanical marauders. They were definitely based on the mechanical monsters.
Get off my keyboard. What are you doing? You're full of mischief, aren't you? Full of mischief. I mean, there are times that the rotoscoping doesn't quite work for me. I'll be honest. Sometimes in the facial expressions, I think there are certainly animation techniques that have improved on things. But
Yeah.
let's face it, 98% of the time, this show is just gorgeous.
Mm. And remember, it was this show that influenced Bruce Timm.
Absolutely. And you can totally see it in that first season, especially of Batman the Animated Series. You can totally see the Fleischer influence. It's everywhere.
Mm.
Even with small things, just like the way it's shaded. Like, yeah, very, very clever stuff.
A little bit of wonkiness with the way the robot's designed here, because the way, and this being, my experience with action figures, you look at the arms and it's only got an up and down, bend at the elbow. It doesn't have a turn. So how is it throwing the jewels in its back? And this is actually the first and only time that he uses X-ray vision in the shorts.
Yeah, apparently this was the first time he also changed into his Superman costume inside a phone booth. This was the first time that was ever seen on screen. So that's pretty cool. I did just realise I was muted then, but I mean, there's little details in this sequence, just even paintings of the ground, like you can see all the rooftops and stuff. It's just beautiful artwork, and it all just comes together to create something rather special.
Yep.
Even just the lighting on the villain's face just then, as it came to that close-up shot of camera, just absolutely phenomenal. And I've always liked this shot with the power lines as well. Always reminds me of that one Superboy episode with the robot. What was it?
Program for Death?
No, not Program for Death. It was the one with the I think they was robots from the future or something, and at the end
War
he
of the
uses
Species?
I think so. Yeah, the one where he turns sand into glass with his heat vision at the end.
War of the Species.
Yeah, always reminds me of that episode for some reason.
Now we get a nice shot of all the interior rooms of his lair, which is one thing you don't usually see with supervillains in comics. You don't see all the different workrooms where they've been working on this part and that part and this part. The coming
usually
together.
you get one main room and that's it, isn't it? The equivalent of the 60s Batcave set. Like we know the Batcave is probably a little bit bigger than we can see, because especially since there's one wall that we just never ever see, because that's where the camera always is.
Yeah.
There's always, like with sets, there's always that invisible wall somewhere. But it's nice in animation that they actually show a little bit more than just the one room.
Just that maniacal look on his face as he's blasting Superman with heat and fire.
And Got to say as well, the fire, the lava, like it. I like the fact that it actually looks like it's glowing. Like that's very difficult to pull off, especially back then. I don't even know how they would have accomplished that. Even just the use of shadows, like it would have been quite easy for them just not to include the shadow for that scene. Nobody would have really noticed or cared, I imagine. But they did it anyway because it looked
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah, that lava just looks well, not lava, it's what, molten steel or something, but
Yeah.
man, it just looks cool. Well, so I miss the days when a supervillain could just wear a tuxedo and that'd be enough. Like, where are all the dapper supervillains? Like, where have they gone? We
The
need to bring
closest we
back
have
the
nowadays is the Penguin and the Joker.
yeah, I guess. Time to bring back some of the dapper supervillains, you know.
Yep.
I suppose they went away when they stopped doing, every other issue being a gangster story.
Yep. There is one other
Yeah.
reference to this story in a more recent Superman comic.
Oh yeah.
It
Was
was
that
during the New 52. I think it was issue number 1 of the New 52 Superman.
right?
They're in the Daily Planet office and they're talking about all these battles that he's had. And there's a reference
Oh,
to a robot master named Dr. Fleischer, who looks exactly like the
that guy. That's
yep,
awesome. I love when they do stuff like that. Yeah, that's just absolutely brilliant. Um, I tell you what, I've just pulled up the IMDb for this. I'm going to read out just some of the trivia about this episode because I think there's some interesting stuff. Yeah, like I said, this is the first Superman story in which Clark Kent changes into his Superman costume inside a phone booth, which is
yep,
just badass. Yeah, front page of the Daily Planet, you can actually see the date, which is Max Fleischer's birthday, which is interesting. Kryptonite is shown in its customary glowing green light in this episode. I guess don't remember seeing Kryptonite in this episode, so I think maybe that's just
I think it's during the explosion of Krypton scene.
quite possibly, yeah. The evil genius inventor is never formally named, yeah. So I'm glad that when it came to the comic books, they named him Fleischer. I think that's a very cool idea. I didn't
Yep.
know about that. Yeah, the Metropolis Police Department apparently are using Tommy guns on the mechanical monsters. I think that's just an interesting little detail because, yeah, I guess it's the era that it's in. Let's see what else. What else? First time in motion pictures where Superman uses his X-ray vision, as you pointed out, which
Yep.
is very cool. So that's two firsts in this. And yeah, it also says about how the scene with the police officers shooting at the flying mechanical monster is referenced heavily in Sky Captain and the World of Tomorrow, which I think
Yes.
we talked about a little bit when we did episode 1 a while ago. I think you may have brought that up at some point.
Yeah, the design on
Yeah,
the giant robots in that movie is heavily influenced by the design on these robots.
yeah. For some reason, I had a memory, like it must be a false memory, but I could have sworn there was a reference to the Mechanical Monster either in Action Comics 1000 or maybe in the Adventures of Superman run. But I think I might just be completely mistaken on that, unless it was just another montage
Hmm.
moment type thing, and I don't know.
I'll
I'm
have to
sure
pull
there's
my
other
copies.
references,
Yeah, I'll have to pull my copies and look it up.
Yeah. But either way, absolutely phenomenal episode. Maybe it is the best episode of the show. It's been a while since I've seen some of the others. There's a couple of episodes that I'm guessing are not going to crack my top 5, to be honest. But this is
Yeah,
probably number 1 right now.
There's a couple of little ones that are very much
Problematic, shall we say?
Yes, problematic based upon the time period it was made. You know, it was the height of the Second World War. So
Yeah. Mechanical monsters. I would go so far as to maybe make this a 9 out of 10. Not just
so would
because it's, I mean, it's not even just because how influential it is. It's just beautifully animated.
it's
Yeah,
probably
it's just really fun.
out of all of the Fleischer cartoons, this is probably the the gold standard out of all of them.
Yeah. That shot with the shadows on the wall of, the lair. They did not have to include those shadows. They could have easily just gone, you know what, we're going to save a couple $100 by just not adding the shadows this time. Nobody would have cared, but it's there because they just went the extra mile, and
Yeah,
you've got to respect that. It's something that makes this episode particularly special.
yeah.
Little
The
ways they could
Fleischers,
have saved money, but they didn't. I
yeah, the
love that.
Fleischers as an animated house. Yeah, they weren't the they weren't the Looney Tunes. They weren't the Disneys, but when they said that it was going to cost like $20,000 each episode
Hmm.
to National Comics at the time, and
They
National Comics said,
expected them to tell them to take a hike, didn't they? But
yeah,
they
but
actually bought
National
it.
Comics said, yeah, we'll pay it. And you know what? They gave them every last penny
Yeah,
worth.
you can see it. It's right there up on screen, and probably stuff like the shadows in that. That is probably just those little touches, is just to say, you know what, you wanted to know why it's so expensive. That's why.
Yeah,
And what can you say to that after? Because that shot looks phenomenal. Like nobody at the studio is going to be like, well, I think that was a waste of money. Like maybe it was a waste of money. Maybe they could have spent that on a later episode or something. But it looks so cool that nobody in their right mind is going to complain about that, I don't think. Um,
yeah, and
Either
plus the
way,
fact that
yeah.
each supervillain that he does take on in each show, it's not like they're using a standard, same guy each time.
Mm.
They're designing a whole new character every time he does take on a quote unquote supervillain.
New character, new layer for that character to live in every time, because you can't just have them appearing in the same layers as each other, because that wouldn't make any sense. Unless there's just like a waiting list, and when each villain gets caught, the next person gets moved in. But yeah, no, just no. Um, but yeah, they had to redesign every single week. It's the same thing that some of the showrunners of Doctor Who have said. It's one of the hardest shows on television to write, because every episode you need to build all new sets, cast all new characters, sometimes design all new monsters. And it's just like Star Trek, but at least Star Trek every now and then can do a bottle episode where it's just set on the Enterprise. Like
Yeah.
Doctor Who, it's a bit harder to do that with the TARDIS. They've done it a couple of times, but to not always the most success. Like even the most recent time they did it was kind of a dodgy episode in a lot of ways, mostly due to bad performances, to be fair.
Yeah.
But I seem to remember it was either Tom Baker's Doctor, or maybe it was someone a little bit later than him. They wanted a load of shots of inside of the TARDIS, and they literally just shot in an old hospital. So apparently the inside of the TARDIS corridors just looked like an old disused hospital, which is just so stupid. But
Yeah, and then
there you
that's
go.
the other thing with Doctor Who. Every single Doctor they changed the inside of the TARDIS like 5 or 6 times.
Yeah, I kind of wish that they would keep the TARDIS interior a couple of times. They usually change it when it's a change of showrunner, but I know obviously Stephen Moffat, when he was show running, he changed it towards the end of Matt Smith's run, and then when Capaldi took over, he kept the same console room, but they just added a load of bookshelves, like they made it his own, which I thought
Mm,
was a particularly nice way of doing it. Part of me wishes they go back to the original design for a while though, because William Hartnell's TARDIS, we saw so many rooms in William Hartnell's TARDIS. Like
yeah.
we saw each individual companion, like they all had bedrooms. We saw the bedrooms. We saw like the Doctor had an office. Like when was the last time we saw any of that on the modern show? I know we've got off topic, really off topic, but there you go. And I've got a cat biting my foot. Hello. Did you hear her just then? Oh,
I did.
that's brilliant. Hello, little one. Hello, Salem. Little Salem Saberhagen. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching. We'll see you next week. It's so hot, I'm going to go sit out in the garden, I think. See you then. Goodbye.
Viacom.